Sergeant Malik Thompson wakes before dawn each day, the sky still dark and deep blue as he slips on his crisp uniform.
Ow.
He smooths the fabric until every crease is perfect, checks the shine on his boots until they catch the weak light of the rising sun, and pins his beret squarely on his head. Outside his small quarters at Fort Republic, the world is quiet, except for the faint hum of the base's generators and the distant roll of an early supply convoy. Malik steps out onto the concrete walk, breath visible in the cool morning air, and takes up his post at the ceremonial gate. He stands tall and motionless, eyes straight ahead, hands resting lightly on the rifle positioned in front of him. Most who pass through, he is simply the polite guard who offers a crisp salute. Visitors lower their car windows, smile politely, and nod as he scans their papers with efficient calm. Soldiers hurry by on their way to breakfast, their boots clicking on the pavement, but they barely glance at him. In his steady presence, they see reliability and routine, nothing more. Yet behind that calm facade, Malik's mind is rarely still. He remembers the long hours he spent training for special communications work, deciphering codes and learning signals, languages that could turn chaos into safety. He recalls evenings spent hunched over a small Morse key in a hidden corner of his last assignment, tapping out messages that could save lives. But here at Fort Republic, no one asks him for those skills. He keeps them folded inside, like a secret, place he can visit only when the base is silent. During breaks, he drifts to the small room behind the gate where old service records are stored. The room is musty, filled with metal cabinets and dusty folders labeled by year and unit. He slides open a drawer marked Archives, runs his fingers over the file tabs, and pulls out faded photographs of men and women in uniform. He reads, dispatches from decades ago, letters sent home by soldiers in distant places, and notes scrawled by officers recording code tests. He studies those documents with a careful eye, as if they might reveal something he missed the first time when no one is watching. Malik takes out a small handheld device, practice telegraph key, and taps out sequences of dots and dashes. He listens for the faint beep in his earpiece, then repeats the pattern, training his hands and mind to speak the language of secrecy. He knows that one day those skills might matter again. For now, though, he tucks the device back into his pocket, zips up his jacket, and returns to his post. The ceremonial gate calls him back, and he slides into position as if guided by an invisible thread. Each hour stands motionless, but his eyes move with the precision of a seasoned scout. His gaze sweeps across the visitor's lane, the vehicle inspection point, and the distant perimeter fence where cameras swivel like watchful eyes. He notices cracks in the pavement that others would miss, the way a branch brushes against a fence wire, or the flicker of a light in a guard tower. Yet he betrays no sign of distraction. His face remains calm, as if the world outside his stare does not exist beyond the uniform he wears. Soldiers who rotate through the gate duties sometimes stop to ask him for tips on maintaining a polished uniform or for advice on memorizing the drill steps. He answers in a soft, steady voice, offering encouragement and small pointers. They learn quickly that he never volunteers his past or speaks of missions. When pressed, he simply says he's been at the base long enough to know the best ways to stand, salute, and serve. His modesty only deepens the mystery, and soon rumors swirl that he must have been someone important before. On one humid afternoon, a school group visits the base. Children in matching caps and bright shirts cluster near the gate, their teacher pointing out each landmark with enthusiasm. Malik holds his position as the children press their faces against the fence, eyes wide with curiosity. A small girl tugs at her mother's hand and whispers loudly, "Why does he never talk?" The mother smiles and gently explains that some guards are meant to show strength through silence, letting their actions do the speaking. The girl nods, impressed by his stillness. Soon the chatter moves on to the big tank parked nearby. At the end of his shift, Malik allows himself a moment to stretch his stiff muscles and rub his shoulders. He steps away from the gate and walks to the mess hall, where the aroma of coffee and scrambled eggs fills the air. He moves to the corner of the room, choosing a seat near the window. Outside, sunlight dances on the gravel road, and supply trucks roll past, dust swirling in their wake. He eats slowly, savoring each bite as if it were part of a ritual. Once he finishes, he rises, nods to the cook, and returns to the gate for the next watch. Some nights, when the base is quiet and most lights are low, Malik slips away from his quarters and heads to the rooftop of the training building. There, under a sky strewn with stars, he sets up the telegraph key and practices tapping memory drills. He recalls the meters of radio waves he once sent across deserts, mountains, and oceans. He hears in his mind the crackle of enemy frequencies he had broken years ago, messages that once carried secret plans. He lets the pulses flow through his fingertips, a language only he truly understands. Though people call him just a ceremonial guard, Malik knows he is more than that. He carries within him a lifetime of service, coded messages, and quiet bravery. He holds himself with the dignity of a man who has stood in shadowed rooms to protect others. And yet he remains content in his post, where his uniform is impeccable, and his duty clear. Each dawn, he returns to the gate, stands at attention, and watches the world pass by. Ready for whatever call might come in, knowing that when it does, he will answer it without hesitation. Colonel Elena Garcia arrived at Fort Republic on a warm Thursday morning. She was known for her sharp eyes, calm presence, and years of service in military intelligence. Soldiers on the base respected her, but they also knew not to test her. Patience. She didn't like wasting time, and she could spot a lie from across a room. That morning, she was visiting to inspect some old records and tour the base's ceremonial area, something she hadn't done in years. As her jeep rolled through the entrance, she noticed the guard at the ceremonial gate. He stood perfectly. Still, his uniform neat, boots shining, and face focused. There was nothing out of place. Colonel Garcia's driver slowed down, holding up her pass. The guard took it gently, scanned it, and returned it with a salute so precise it looked like a scene from a military film. She nodded at him as they passed through, but something about his presence stayed in her mind. Later that afternoon, the colonel walked through the old building that held military records, uniforms, and photos. It was a quiet space with dusty air and the soft creaking of old floorboards. She moved from one glass display case to the next, reading names and studying the badges worn by soldiers of past generations. Then she noticed something odd in a photo and emblem, a tiny pattern stitched onto a soldier's shoulder. It was nearly invisible to most eyes, but not to hers. It was the mark of a highly classified unit she had once worked with herself. A signal team so skilled, they could change the course of operations with a single line of code. Her curiosity grew. That emblem, hidden in plain sight in the photo, looked exactly like the faint stitching she had noticed earlier on the guard's uniform. She hadn't paid attention at first, but now the memory became clear. She could see the small thread pattern barely visible, but definitely there right on his left sleeve. That wasn't part of a ceremonial uniform, not at all. She turned to her assistant and said, "Get me the name of the gate guard from this morning, the one who checked our pass." The assistant nodded and left quickly. In less than an hour, a file landed on her desk with one name, Sergeant Malik Thompson. As she read through the file, she was surprised to find very little written. His role was listed as ceremonial guard, with no mention of his earlier service or special training. Most military files had more awards, history of deployments, notes from commanders. Malik's file was almost empty. It didn't add up. Determined to know more, Colonel Garcia walked out to the gate herself the next morning. Malik stood in the same place as before, still and silent, his eyes focused straight ahead. As she approached, he gave his usual sharp salute. At ease. "Sergeant," she said, stopping in front of him. He lowered his hand and stood calmly. "Yes, ma'am. You've been here long?" she asked, her tone friendly but firm. "Yes, ma'am. For years at this post." "You ever serve with comms teams?" she asked, watching his face carefully. There was the slightest pause, and his eyes, just a blink too long. "No, ma'am. Just regular training," he said quietly. Colonel Garcia smiled, just a little. Why is it because I've seen that stitch pattern on exactly one kind of uniform?
Yeah.
At all? Malik didn't answer. He simply looked ahead, face calm. She tilted her head. You don't have to say anything. I'd like to show you something, without waiting for a response. She gestured for him to follow her. He hesitated for a second, then nodded. He handed his rifle to another guard and walked behind the colonel toward the operations building inside. She took him to a control room filled with screens, radios, and live security feeds. She asked the staff to clear the room, then picked up a headset and handed it to him. There's been strange radio traffic near the southern fence. Interference patterns. No one's been able to decode it yet. You think you can take a look? Malik didn't speak. He placed the headset over his ears, closed his eyes, and listened. After 30 seconds, his hand moved to the control panel. He tapped a few keys. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a small notebook, and began writing. Dots, dashes, short lines, Morse code. Colonel Garcia watched in silence as he worked. In less than 5 minutes, he turned to her and said, It's a scrambled test loop. Someone's trying to mask a low-frequency signal. Might be a drone, probably homemade, circling outside the fence. How sure are you? Ma'am, she leaned back, impressed. I thought so. Over the next hour, Malik helped the team isolate the signal. Sure enough, a small drone was flying just outside the boundary line, recording visual data from the base. It had gone undetected by the regular systems. Malik's quick response and deep understanding of signal patterns had made all the difference. The colonel looked at him with new eyes. Why are you still standing guard out front? She asked softly. He gave a small shrug. Some things are better left quiet, but not skills like yours, she replied. We could use your help, real help. That evening, back at his small room near the ceremonial gate, Malik sat on his bed and stared at an old photo he kept in a wooden frame. It showed him in younger years, standing with a group of men and women in desert gear, their faces sunburned and serious. Most of those people were now out of the service. A few never made it home. That life had been intense, full of pressure, full of secrets. That's why he stepped away. That's why he asked for a quiet post one where he wouldn't have to be the one solving every emergency, where he could simply serve with honor and peace. But now, something had changed. The colonel had seen the emblem. She had recognized what it meant. More than that, she had trusted him without needing to ask for proof. And for the first time in years, Malik felt something stirring inside, like an old rhythm returning, like a pulse he thought was long gone. Outside, the wind rustled through the base. The stars above twinkled without sound, as steady and quiet as Malik had always been. But now, someone had looked deeper. Someone had noticed the details that others missed, and that single act was about to change everything. The next morning began like any other at Fort Republic. The sun was just rising, casting golden light over the base. Soldiers were moving quickly through the gates, trucks were rolling in, and the air buzzed with the start of another routine day. But for Sergeant Malik Thompson, this day was going to be very different. Colonel Elena Garcia had asked him to report to the operations building again. This time, there were more people waiting. Senior officers, communication experts, and base security staff had gathered. They didn't know who Malik really was. Some looked at him with curiosity, wondering why a ceremonial guard was in a high-level meeting room. The colonel walked in and nodded at Malik. She tapped the table and said, We have a situation. The room fell silent. She turned to the screens behind her and pointed, This is the feed from last night. Ah! Look at the pattern of movement here. Everyone watched closely. A small flying object had been circling the base's outer area, barely visible in the dark. It moved slowly, as if scanning, this drone is not part of our equipment. It's unknown and came back twice in 48 hours. It's sending strange radio signals, she continued. A younger officer raised his hand. Ma'am, our system didn't flag it. It stayed below radar levels. The colonel looked around. That's why Sergeant Malik is here. He found the signal without any help from our tools. A few heads turned to Malik. He simply nodded, staying quiet. Then the colonel spoke again. This morning, I want a live scan of any incoming radio chatter. If this drone returns, I want to know within seconds. She looked at Malik. Sergeant, will you take the console? Malik walked slowly to the main station. His hands moved, smoothly adjusting dials and opening frequency maps. For the first few minutes, there was nothing but white noise and static. Then, at exactly 7:36, a soft beeping came through. Most couldn't hear it, but Malik could. There, he said. Calmly, it's back. Same pattern, same code. He pressed a few buttons and turned up the volume slightly.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone in the room could hear it. The sound was broken, scattered like bits of language hiding in noise. But Malik's ears were trained. Started writing quickly in his notebook. It's not just a drone, he said after a moment, sending back what it sees. Live transmission. There's a receiver nearby, probably in a vehicle or hidden device outside the fence. The colonel raised an eyebrow. Can you locate it? With the right antennas? Yes, but we need to act fast. Within minutes, the base's mobile response unit was sent to the south boundary. Using the direction Malik provided, they found a small box hidden under some bushes near the outer fence. Inside it was a receiver and a portable battery, evidence that someone had been spying on the base. The officers returned. Shocked, Colonel Garcia looked at Malik and said, You just helped stop a major security breach. If this data had reached the wrong hands, we might never have known. Malik gave a small nod. Thank you, ma'am. Later that day, the colonel met with the base commander. She explained everything: how Malik had detected the signal, how he cracked the code in minutes, and how his quiet presence at the gate had hidden someone with advanced training. The commander listened carefully, then opened Malik's service. Record. This file is incomplete, the commander said, frowning. That's because most of his real service was confidential, Colonel Garcia replied. He was part of an elite communication unit that worked in high-risk zones. His record was sealed years ago. The commander looked thoughtful. So why was he placed at a ceremonial post? He requested it, she answered. After what? He went through. Maybe he needed peace, but we need him now. His skills are rare. We can't afford to let them go unused anymore. By evening, Malik was officially removed from gate duty. His fellow guards watched in silence as he cleared his station, packed his gear, and walked toward the intelligence wing. Some saluted him, unsure of what had changed. Others just stared, surprised. He entered a new room filled with screens, wires, and blinking lights. A small desk had already been set up for him. On it was a headset, a signal decoder, and a locked drawer for his personal tools. Colonel Garcia met him there and handed him a small badge. This gives you full access to the comms room and encryption lab, she said. Malik looked at the badge, then back at her. You trust me that much? She smiled. Did today? That wasn't luck. That was skill, discipline, and experience. That night, Malik sat alone in his new office. The room was quiet, filled with soft hums of equipment. He turned on the decoder and stared at the blinking lights. A sense of purpose settled in his chest. It had been years since he'd felt this way needed, respected, challenged. He thought of the long days at the gate where no one looked past his uniform. He remembered the children staring at him, the soldiers who passed by without knowing who he truly was. Things had changed. Not because he said anything, but because someone finally noticed. The next morning, the base was buzzing. Rumors spread fast. The ceremonial guard. He's in comes now. One soldier asked. Did you hear he stopped a spy drone? Another whispered. But Malik didn't pay attention to the whispers. He showed up early, reviewed radio logs, trained a few junior officers in decoding basics, and spent hours scanning for odd signals. He worked with quiet focus, never seeking attention. Colonel Garcia visited often, asking for updates, offering suggestions, and slowly building a team around him. She even suggested that Malik lead training sessions for new recruits in secure communication techniques. At first, Malik hesitated. He wasn't used to teaching. But when he stepped into the classroom, he found something surprising he enjoyed. The young soldiers listened carefully, took notes, and respected every word he said. By the end of the week, Malik had gone from invisible guard to vital member of the base's intelligence force. He hadn't changed. He was still quiet, still precise, still humble. But now the world around him had finally caught up with who he truly was, and in the glow of the computer screens, with messages flowing across invisible waves, Malik Thompson found himself once again where he belonged, at the heart of something important. Malik Thompson sat quietly at his new desk, staring at the signal charts on the monitor. The soft clicking of the decoding machine filled the room, but his mind wasn't just focused on the signals. It was thinking about the colonel's words. From earlier that day, "We want you to train a new communications team. Your skills should be passed on, Sergeant. You're not just here to detect signals. You're here to build something." He hadn't expected this. He thought he would just help for a short time and return to the quiet life of guarding the ceremonial gate. But that was no longer an option. Everything had changed. His name was being passed around the base. Officers were talking about the man who cracked a code in minutes and stopped a spying drone. Young soldiers were beginning to ask for his advice, hoping to learn from him. That afternoon, he walked slowly across the base to the training center. It was a long building with high windows and rows of empty classrooms. Inside one room, 5 young soldiers were waiting. Some looked nervous, others curious. One of them, a bright-eyed woman named Private Leela Jones, raised her hand as soon as Malik entered. "Are you really the one who caught the spy drone?" Malik gave a small smile. "I'm not a sir. Just Sergeant Thompson. And yes, I helped stop it." The room fell silent, full of respect. He could see it in their eyes. They didn't see him as just a guard anymore. They wanted to learn from him. "All right," he said gently. "Let's begin." He started with the basics. He taught them how to really listen to signals. Most people thought the work was just about machines and buttons, but Malik explained that it was also about instinct. He taught them how to recognize patterns in the noise, how to break messages into tiny pieces, and how to look for the smallest clues. He told stories, never too much detail, always careful not to share classified parts, but enough to make the lessons come alive. Each day, the team grew stronger. Private Leela became quick at catching weak signals. Another soldier, Corporal James Lee, showed talent in building simple signal blockers. Malik encouraged them, guided them, and never raised his voice. He believed that calm teaching left a deeper mark than shouting ever could. But even as he worked with the new team, Malik kept his habits. Late at night, he would go to the roof, just like before. He brought his small telegraph key and tapped out old messages under the stars. Wasn't sure why he did it anymore. Maybe it was comfort. Maybe it was memory. The stars looked the same as they did years ago, back when he served in the desert. Back when he lived a different life. One night, Colonel Garcia joined him on the rooftop. She stood quietly beside him for a while before speaking. "Do you ever regret stepping away from it all?" Malik didn't answer right away. He looked up at the sky, then said, "I needed peace. I had seen enough. I thought silence would heal everything." "Did it?" she asked softly, paused. "Some of it, but not all. Something was still missing." "I didn't realize that until I started helping again." The colonel nodded. "You still have more to give, Malik. You're not just rebuilding a team, you're rebuilding yourself." Those words stayed with him. The next day, news came in about an upcoming security test. A mock operation was planned by Central Command to see how well different military bases could respond to unknown threats. It would be a surprise challenge. No one would know when or how it would happen. Malik's new team was going to be tested. The young soldiers trained harder. Malik gave them more complex codes, more difficult tasks, and longer hours. They stayed late into the evening, solving puzzles and building confidence. Malik could see the fire in their eyes, the same fire he once had when he was young. It gave him hope. Then one morning, the test arrived. At exactly 4 o'clock, alarms buzzed through the base. Radios were jammed with strange signals. Lights flickered. Communication lines cut off suddenly and no one could reach command. Panic started to build. Inside the signal room, Malik's team jumped into action. Private Leela began scanning frequencies, while Corporal Lee worked to reconnect the signal routers. Another soldier, Marcus, grabbed the backup headset and started logging all incoming chatter. Malik stood in the center of the room, calm and focused. He wasn't shouting, he was guiding. Check for repeated tones. Look for patterns. Don't fight the noise, read through it, he said gently. They found it. A hidden message was buried inside the interference. It was a test broadcast, full of puzzles and challenges meant to confuse them. But Malik's team didn't get confused. They followed everything he had taught them. Within 25 minutes, they cracked the full code, restored the base's radio lines, and flagged the mock enemy signal as neutralized. The colonel, watching from the observation deck, smiled proudly. When the test ended, senior officers gathered to review the results. Fort Republic had passed with the highest score among all the regional bases, and everyone knew why. Later that evening, Colonel Garcia called for a meeting in the assembly hall. Officers, soldiers, and staff gathered to hear the results of the test. She stood at the front, holding a small box. Okay. Every base was challenged today. But one base stood out, she began. And at the center of that success was a man many of you walked past 4 years without knowing his story. She turned to Malik, who was seated quietly in the front row. Sergeant Malik Thompson. You chose silence. You chose humility. And still, you gave everything when your base needed you. On behalf of the command, I present you with this commendation for outstanding service. The hall filled with respectful applause. Malik walked to the front, accepted the medal, and gave a quiet nod. He didn't make a long speech. He simply said, "Thank you. I didn't do this alone." But it was a team effort. They were ready because someone gave them a chance, just like someone once gave me one. After the ceremony, young soldiers came to shake his hand. Some asked to join his training. Others simply wanted to say thank you. That night, as the base returned to normal, Malik sat once again on the rooftop under the stars. This time, he didn't bring his telegraph key. He didn't need it anymore. He'd found a new signal, one made of trust, growth, and quiet leadership. It was stronger than any code he had ever cracked. ChatGPT said, months passed at Fort Republic, and Sergeant Malik Thompson was no longer the quiet figure standing at the ceremonial gate. He had become a vital part of the base's security and intelligence team. Yet through all the changes, he remained humble and steady, earning respect not through words but through his actions. The transformation was not sudden but slow, like the turning of the seasons. Early on, many soldiers had difficulty understanding the man who once seemed invisible to them. Now, they watched as he led training sessions, guided young recruits, and worked late into the night decoding complex signals. His past as a secret communications expert was no longer hidden, and people began to see the strength behind his quiet demeanor. One morning, Colonel Elena Garcia called Malik to her office. She sat behind her desk, looking serious but pleased. "Sergeant Thompson," she said, "your work has been noticed far beyond this base. Command wants to send you to lead a special communications unit in the field." Malik was surprised. The idea of leaving the safety of Fort Republic was daunting. He had once sought peace here, away from danger and chaos. But the call to serve was strong. "I understand, ma'am," Malik replied quietly. "But I'd like to prepare the team here first. They still have much to learn." The colonel smiled. Warmly, "That's the spirit I hope to hear. You are not just a leader, you are a teacher." Meanwhile, Malik's team was growing. Private Leela Jones and Corporal James Lee had become experts in their own right. New recruits arrived, eager to learn. From the man who had once been just a ceremonial guard, they respected him for his knowledge and for his kindness. How he never shouted or showed frustration, even when mistakes were made. One afternoon, the base was again tested not by drills or exercises, but by a real threat. Reports came in of unusual movements near the border, with signs of foreign agents trying to intercept military communications. The base went on high alert. Malik and his team worked through the night, monitoring signals, decoding messages, and coordinating with security forces. Their calm, focused approach kept the base safe. When the threat was over, the commanders praised the entire unit, but it was clear that Malik's leadership had made the difference. The day after the threat, past the base held a ceremony. Soldiers gathered in the parade ground, standing tall as Colonel Garcia spoke to the crowd. She looked directly at Malik. Today, we recognize not only the bravery of our entire team, but especially the quiet strength of one man who stood ready when it mattered most. She handed Malik a plaque engraved with his name and a simple phrase, "Guardian of the Silent Watch." Malik accepted the honor with a deep bow of his head. He thought of the days when he stood alone at the gate, unseen and unheard. Now, he was seen. He was heard. But more than that, he had found purpose. After the ceremony, Malik took a walk around the base. Soldiers stopped him to shake his hand or offer a nod of respect. Children from the nearby town, who sometimes watched the base activities, waved to him as he passed. That evening, Malik found a quiet bench under a large oak tree near the base chapel. He sat and pulled out the old photo he always carried, the one with his former unit in the desert. He looked at each face and remembered the struggles, the losses, and the friendships. He whispered a quiet thank you for the path that had led him here. Malik's journey was more than a story of skills and secrets. It was a story of patience, humility, and trust. He had taught others, but he had also learned. He had stepped into the shadows when needed and stepped forward when called. His role had changed from a ceremonial guard to a celebrated defender of his country's safety. The classified emblem on his sleeve was no longer a secret. It was a symbol of dedication and honor, worn with quiet pride. And as the sun set behind the distant hills, Malik Thompson stood tall once again, not just as a soldier in uniform, but as a man who had found his true place in the world.